Good afternoon, everybody. Another lovely autumn day. It's raining and then not raining and then raining. So, um, we're going to go through a couple of the horror stories from this week. As always, many, many horror stories where we go, why did you think that was a good idea to do that? And then Q&A after that. I'm going to start because, I get first dibs on these things. So the one I had yesterday is a potential client, a golf club that called me and said, right, we want to make the pro redundant. He is actually an employee. We clarified that after a little bit of going backwards and forwards and explaining what self-employed was and what employed was. And it's like, I don't know why I have to explain this to people. Anyway, he is employed and they're paying him 21K. Fine. He gets training income separately, but they're actually paying that to look after the pro shop, and they're losing money on the pro shop, which is also in-house. Okay, so they want to get rid of him from that. He can still be teaching, and the pro shop they're going to bring in-house. And I'm like, right, okay. And then also taking into consideration that he's like, oh yeah, it's just the one person to make redundant. I'm like, okay. He's like, oh yeah, because we've got a 0-hour staff doing the serving, but we can just fire them, can't we? And I'm like, no, because they might be over 2 years. Oh, I thought we could just fire them. Okay, no, that's fine. And then the next bit was when I got quite abrupt with him, because this is a committee member who's saying there's so much work to do. We need to get a general manager, and we haven't got a general manager. Okay. So, and then he says, so we've got the club secretary. I'm like, well, club secretary, you shouldn't be having a club secretary and a general manager. They're sort of, those are interchangeable. I know there is a club secretary is a much more admin role than a strategic role, but the biggest clubs have both. You are not a big club. You just told me you don't want to pay 21K for pro shop, which is peanuts in the world. So okay, but fine. So it's actually an admin assistant. Fine, no problem. And then he says we're going to knock down the wall between the office and the pro shop so that when golfers come in, the GM, who we're going to pay a lot more than 21K, can sell golf balls to the golfers. And that's when I went, no, you can't do that. He said, what do you mean we can't do that? They'll have time. They haven't got very much to do. It's like you started this conversation by telling me you needed a GM because there was so much to do. And now you're saying you're going to pay a GM way more than 21K to actually provide people with golf balls. And I said, let's go through a scenario here. How is it going to work if the GM is doing a disciplinary hearing? Okay. The club secretary who works part-time is not in, and a golfer comes in and says they want some golf balls. Is the GM supposed to stop their meeting to serve the golf balls? I hadn't thought about that. Oh yeah, no, we were discussing this at committee and nobody came up with that. And the point I'm trying to make here, apart from wow, I've never heard that solution before, is that we all need business owners, general managers, when we're proposing ideas, to find the person who says no, or I don't see how that would work. There's no advantage to talking to people who say, oh yeah, that sounds like a good idea, which is what happened. That all of the committee thought this was a great idea. Right. You need to find somebody who points out, hopefully, the flaw in your plan so that you can adjust for it, like I did. There's no we can do it. So we then went through, actually, we can put it behind the bar because all we're doing is golf balls and tees. I mean, we're not doing fitting for clubs or anything like that. It really is just the basics, the emergency supplies. If somebody turns up and goes, oh, I forgot my balls. Okay. I do think we should have highly fluorescent balls that respond to GPS within an inch so that we can find them, because the number of balls I've lost on the golf course, because despite them being high vis, they've just gone. I don't know. Why is there not a magnetic thing that we can just pick them up with? I don't know. But obviously that's not sporting. You've got to admit that you've lost your ball, but actually we could save so much many balls. I'm sure they're not good for the environment. But the point I'm trying to make is that any of the projects, and I'm going to say probably in a golf club, it's usually the opposite. There's lots of people telling you can't do it and it won't work and blah, blah, blah. But I'm just saying, if you're getting yeses all the time, you might want to think about, find somebody, hopefully an expert, not just anybody off the street, to say, this is what we're thinking of doing. What flaws can you see in it, rather than just go, oh, everybody thinks this is a good idea, and then finding out that it doesn't work. Okay. Lauren would like to say something today.
So I just wanted to continue with the case that we've mentioned a couple of times, the sexual assault one from a member. So we are they are going to do a disciplinary with him, but they were looking at suitable sanctions to deliver to him. And a couple of things that were discussed was a temporary suspension of the member up until February, and also an alcohol ban for maybe 1 or 2 years. Um, the issue with both of them options really is temporary suspension is eventually going to come back. If we're going to temporarily suspend him, that's admitting that he has sexually assaulted someone. Therefore, why is it not accept? Why would it still be okay to do that in 6 months' time? It doesn't matter about the duty of care. Um, the risk of that is when he does return, there's a risk of a constructive dismissal claims if they've got over 2 years service because he's now returned and employees may not want to work with him knowing that he's sexually assaulted their colleagues in the past. And also the risk of the sexual harassment claim that doesn't go away because it's happened, but it's even higher now um, for that person that's returning. Also with the alcohol bans, even that this man's own admission, he admitted that he was drinking, but he said he wasn't drunk. So an alcohol ban wouldn't make a difference because if he had done this when he was drunk, um, stopping him from drinking alcohol, he's still potentially going to do the same thing. And by his own admission, he's a touchy person. So yeah, I don't think banning him from alcohol is going to stop him being a touchy person. Um, so uh, our advice is if you're going to see if you've found that there has been sexual assault, you can't temporarily say, well, you can't come near our staff. You need to expel them. And all of that wouldn't sit well with an employment judge either. And then there's a further update, because that's what I was going to mention before. Since then, that person's wanted to resign from the club rather than go through the disciplinary. An issue with allowing them to resign is that there then won't be a sanction against that person, so they could return as a guest or a visitor, particularly as his wife is also a member of the club. So he could attend as her guest. So we would always advise that you follow through with the disciplinary to be able to issue a sanction and therefore expel them permanently. Yeah, just a little update on that one, really.
Great. Did you have something to share this week?
Yeah, I've got a horror story. Just one for everyone to. It's the kind of thing that you think is really innocent, but actually can land you in a bit of situation, right? So I'm dealing with a club right now who had an employee who was like a club admin, who they then had a what was the word I'm looking for? Vacancy offer up a different role. So they said, yeah, you know what? Trial period, you're going to do this for 6 weeks and then we'll come back. What they didn't do at any point was put that in writing. So they've just gone on and said to her verbally, yeah, this is now your job for 6 weeks on trial, but we haven't written that down anywhere. We haven't stipulated what the terms and conditions of the trial are. We haven't said that if this doesn't go well, that you might fail the trial. They haven't given any of that possibility. Now coming to it, the person's not succeeding well in the trial. The reason they're not is because of a disability. They've got dyspraxia. And I think we've talked about this recently, but that makes it difficult to sometimes put words together. Things start jumbling around, and it's really affecting the role they're doing. However, because this club haven't written down at any point that this is a trial period or etc., the role is taken as permanent. The change is taken permanently. So now they have to deal with an employee who is not doing well in their new role because they didn't go through the trial. And the risk here is if the person then gets, let's say the club decide to say you failed the trial and put them back down to the role they were doing. This person can now flag and say, have you done that because I've got a disability? Or where is it that you told me that there was a trial that I may fail? Where did you tell me that? If you never told me that, I assume that you'd given me this role. So for them, it's a bit of a risk. It's a bit of a flag. So the ideal is you follow the full process. You give them a letter, you stipulate the details of the trial, you have review meetings, so that at no point would they be caught unaware to say either this is not going well or this is going well. So they're just going through something a little bit right now. Yes, Mel.
If somebody changes, so this person's gone into a new role, if they're given a new contract for that role with a original continuation date and a new position, does not their probation for that new role start again in that role?
No, because they're still an employee, so they haven't started. We wouldn't restart someone's probation because new role. Their continuous service date is the date that their probation would start.
Even though the role is different?
No, so that's when you would be doing it wouldn't be just a new contract. What you'd be doing is writing down, we're offering you this role, you're going to be doing it for 3 months, we're going to review it, and then after that, we'll confirm it in writing. You wouldn't just give them a new contract. So contracts probationary period would only ever apply under the first 2 years, and usually at the beginning of the first 6 months. Yeah. So if they're over 2 years, there is no real probationary period anyway. And actually, even if they're over 2 years and they're trying out for 3 months, that probationary period only means that they would go back to the previous role. They could not be dismissed for failing. They could only go back to the previous role. Whereas with a genuine new person, you could just part company for a week's notice. That's not the case once you're over 2 years.
Okay.
And you would, yeah. So you can't use the probationary period in the contract for somebody going into a new role over 2 years. You have a separate letter, and once they've passed that 3-month trial, then we give them the contract backdating the start in that role. Yeah.
Yeah. I need to pick up off this call with something that I'm about to do.
Yeah.
Because I thought I was a while ago given a new contract and my probation started again, although I had been with that company for 2 years.
A long time. Yeah.
And they said, no, your probation's on. I said, well, I've worked with the company for 2.5 years. You're starting my probation in the same role at a different club. Yeah. I've got to do you have. And it's like, that doesn't make sense. No. So that was actually incorrect then. Okay, so I need to have a chat with somebody about something I'm about to do here.
Right, okay. Yeah, good, okay. The other thing that came up... Oh, sorry. Melanie, did you have a...
I was just going to say on that point, if somebody in that 3 months period you think they're not suitable and you put them back to the previous position, does that mean that if the new position had an increased amount of salary and you have to put them back to the other one, they go back to their original salary?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
But like Siji was saying, you've got to put that in writing and get them to sign it before you change anything, so that everybody understands and nobody says, oh, but I thought because that's when it just gets nasty. Yeah. Okay. The other interesting one we've had is on the GCMA advice line. So obviously you often only ever hear one side of the story, and we always start off feeling sorry for people, and then they send you stuff through, and then you go, I don't think you're helping yourself here. So this GM was upset because the committee was trying to change their contract. Okay, that's not great, particularly if the committee, as usual, is just like, here's a contract, sign it. You're like, okay, that's not quite how it works, but fine. And they were saying that they had 3 months full pay sick pay and 3 months half pay sick pay. And we're like, wow, that is a lot for a small club. Okay, and that's not in the new contract. Okay, well, send us over where that is in your previous arrangements. Oh yes, and this person had gone from full-time, so 5 days a week to 4 days a week, and the holiday had stayed at the 20 days plus bank holidays, and now they wanted them to go up to 5 days a week, and then so the argument is like, well, I should then have more days holiday, I don't know, 22 days holiday, 25 days holiday, whatever it is, plus bank holidays, because when I was doing 4 days a week, I was getting 20 days. Now that was a mistake, but the point is, we're like, okay, if you send us what you've got, that's great, we'll have a look at it, thinking we're not going to say anything. Now what is interesting is that the contract from 2017 is really clear. It's 30 hours a week on this salary, 20 days holiday plus bank holidays. really clear. So there is no wriggle room for their club to get out of paying more days holiday if they want to put them up to 5 days. It's the club has issued this contract. It has been signed by the chairman and by the employee, by the general manager. That is absolutely fine. But sick pay is not mentioned. Now, sick pay is mentioned in the original contract from 2012, okay, but not at 3 months, full 3 months half. It's just at SSP. And then the conversation since, so there was a file note, and then there was this new contract, doesn't mention sick pay at all. Now, if sick pay is not mentioned at all, it's SSP. You can only have enhanced sick pay if it is specifically mentioned in the contract. And the general manager had sickness and it had been paid full pay. However, the general manager was also responsible for paying themselves through payroll and didn't have to get anybody's approval. And so actually that money should not have been paid because it should have just been SSP. So we're not aiming to do a disciplinary, although it would be gross misconduct. That is theft because that is not what the general manager was entitled to. But it was 2 years ago. It's like, okay, fine, we're just going to have to leave it. But going forward, we're going to have 10 days full pay per year. The rest is SSP. And that is what they are now saying. Well, I can't possibly have that. I'm going to be ill again. So I'm going to need more money. It's like, okay, but you can't have it both ways. You've got a contract, you've got the holiday, that's absolutely clear, no problem at all. And you had SSP and that carries on. You can't now say because you chose to steal from the club by paying yourself, 6 months money that you weren't entitled to, that is now custom and practice. That isn't how it works. And so having started feeling sorry for this person, I don't feel quite so sorry because we feel they're trying to have their cake and eat it. So just be aware that when you're doing your contracts, and this is why we go over and over and over about contracts, is that it is not to take stuff out. And if you're agreeing any changes to salary, to holidays, to overtime payments, enhanced pay, anything like that, you put it in writing and you get ideally us to read it to go, I understand exactly what you mean, or you do know that means X, Y, Z. And like, oh, I didn't realize. Yes, because you've got to have the right wording. So it's just being aware that with everything, certainly general managers as well, make sure you've got a contract that actually reflects the reality of your role, so that if there are any differences of opinion with the committee, that it's really clear in black and white what you're entitled to. Okay. Right. Melanie Pointer, would you like to go first with a question?
I would. I have a little one. It's based on something you mentioned, I think, last time. And that is, if somebody is leaving and they say to you, and they're currently 0 hours, but that's fine, but they're leaving, and they say to you, actually, in the future, I would be interested. I think we said about this, about doing sort of random hours. And we talked that, they could do a 0 hours thing. But based on the whole holiday problem, if they're going to do very little, and they've actually mentioned this to me as well, is that they would rather go self-employed. Now, I remember that last time you said if you go from employed to self-employed, it's a bit of a nightmare. Based on the fact that this person will be starting another full-time job, do you have any sort of advice or whatever for putting them onto a self-employed contract? Should I wait a certain period, or, is there anything else I need to be aware of?
Yes. So to answer your first question, certain period, at least a month, from issuing their P45 to bring them on as a contractor. Yeah. The guidance for you is to treat them like a contractor when they are a contractor. Yeah. So they have to provide their own equipment. You shouldn't provide the equipment for them. Things like uniform, they shouldn't have uniform. They invoice you. They're not on your payroll. They invoice you for any hours worked. I'm trying to sort of reel them off the top of my head now. They're not entitled to any paid time off. So if they're sick, it's not paid. If they take holiday, they don't come to you and say, can I have this time off? And you say yes, and you pay them. They say to you, I'm having this time off. Yeah. So as long as you treat them as a true contractor, that's okay. Otherwise, it looks like they're just continuing their service as an employee.
Sure. Yeah. So as long as it's a clear month, I have actually got separate contracts. They're more like service agreements. for that, which sort of highlights the points that you've said. So, okay, that's fine. I know that I think Caroline said last time that, you know, it's a sort of HMRC flag, like come and talk to me because they've gone from employed to self-employed. But I'm guessing that's when someone's gone from full-time or whatever hours self-employed to the same hours self-employed. That would be the flag, rather than the fact they've got another job and then did the odd hours. Yeah.
What I would say is that don't give them a contract or anything in writing until you need them and they've agreed to it. So don't give them anything until you say, actually, I do need 10 hours next week. Can you do it? Yes, I can. Right, here's a piece of paper. Sign it. Come in. And you don't even need to have if they're self-employed, you don't even need a piece of paper. I mean, that's the point.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, has somebody else got a question? Mark Gallup?
Yeah, just a question on sort of SSP and holiday. So one of the girls is going in for an operation shortly, and you pay SSP, and she's asked about using some of her holiday up during that time.
Yeah.
Is that okay? And what would you use first? Or
well, I don't know how long she's going to be in for the operation and recovery. That's going to be the key thing. So is how long is she going to be off? How much holiday she got left? Will she have enough holiday for whatever, you know, if you're close between Christmas and New Year? Yeah, those type of things. You still need to make a note in your files. This is a health and safety thing that although she used her holiday, which is fine, given it's an operation, not just an odd day off, it was off for an operation. So you've got that to refer back to if there is sickness absence going forward. Okay. So that we can correctly allocate it. But she could use all of her holiday as long as that doesn't mean she's getting unpaid holiday. That's what we're aiming to do. So she could use a holiday now and then switch to SSP.
Right, okay, yeah.
Or enhanced sick pay if there's any there. But yeah.
No, okay.
Okay.
And the other one is on a junior professional or trainee professional. Is there any reason why that contract would be different from the full-time contracts I've got for other staff?
No, it's just that to be a trainee PGA professional, you have to have 30 hours a week guaranteed as an employee. It can be on minimum wage, but they have to be employed for 30 hours a week for it to qualify as a PGA trainee.
Right, okay, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Paul, have you got any questions?
Yeah. Just a quick, this redundancy one, which I keep asking, in terms of, would you always go with a kind of a not a redundancy but a separation agreement kind of thing, or is it
redundancy versus settlement agreement, do you mean? Sorry.
yes?
Okay, not necessarily. So when we do settlement agreements instead of redundancy, is one, if it's not a true redundancy, so the role is still there, you just want the person gone.
Yeah.
Or if there are a protected characteristic. So let's say, for example, you've got one job available and two applicants. One has a disability, one doesn't, and you want to give it to the one that's not got the disability. You might then make a choice to say this is high risk, that they say they didn't get it because of a disability, swap to a settlement agreement. So so not all the time, it depends on the risk and the situation.
So if we just decide to eliminate that position, obviously we're going to get advice from you guys and do it all.
Yeah.
But then it would be a redundancy.
Yeah, so if you can send us your current structure and your proposed, and then what we usually do is we have like a chat with you, because we can pull out very quickly. We can say, Paul, this isn't a real redundancy.
Yes.
Be honest, you want this person gone, don't you? Yeah. Or likewise, we can say, actually, this person should be involved as well. So get that to us, and then it opens those discussions, and we will say to you, this is high risk, you should look at a settlement, or we'll say, no, that's absolutely fine, this is the process, and then we'll help you at each stage. Yeah.
Cool.
Okay. I am on mute. Any other questions? No? Okay. That's all very good. We're going to be here next week. We are banking horror stories, because then I'm going to be on holiday for 2 weeks in Egypt. And yes, I am looking at the Foreign Office travel advice every single day to check that I am still allowed to go to Egypt. And so far it's okay, but it's just like, yes, it's still current. Yes, you're okay. You're okay. So all the tourist bits along the Nile, absolutely fine. But if you go, more than 20 kilometers from the Nile, it's going very quickly from orange to red. And it's like, that's fine. I don't need to go more than 20 kilometers from the Nile. I'm fine. It's not a problem. So, yes. So it's going to be good. But we'll be here, as always, next week. We might even do a different quiz next week. Let's see what I can find. Maybe protected characteristics. That's always a good one to separate the wheat from the chaff there, as to who actually understands when we say, oh, yes, protected. Oh, of course, I know exactly what you mean. And then we don't. So, yeah, so have a great week. And we'll see you all next week. Bye.
Thanks for watching. If you want a free tribunal audit of your employment contract and handbook, click the link in the description below.